So, welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay. And it's been a little while since we've seen CARN DUM actually, a nice orc-styled fortress here on its hill. Nice wedding cake style as well, with several different layers. You can see that the action has technically already started because the deployment zones mean that you can be right on top of the defensive archers as right as the battle begins. And it is going to be a 5v3, and honestly 32,000 frames for a 5v3 is maybe not as long as you would expect, so I would imagine that the action is going to get underway right from the start here, and we are also going to see a bit of good versus evil action today, I believe, as we see three good factions who have managed to wrest CARN DUM away from the orcs, and now they are back to try and reclaim it. So we'll go through the attacking armies first of all, but this battle was sent in to me by MSQ2, so big thank you to him. Actually, he does tend to send me some good ones. Like, he tends to send me a lot of large-scale battles, which tend to be of pretty high quality as well, so I have big hopes for this particular battle as well. I really like the look of CARN DUM from afar as well. It does look very menacing. But let's start off with the attacking army that's over here, starting off with Beazle playing as Mordor. Mordor have had some good showings lately. Even in the battles where they've lost, they've looked pretty impressive, so we'll see if he is able to continue their good fortunes. Mordor, of course, pretty reliant on their quality units. Like, they are an interesting faction to play in that regard. If you look after your quality units, you're probably going to have a pretty good time with them. If you don't, your army's going to fall apart very quickly. You can see he has brought a standard catapult here, so a little bit cheaper than the troll catapult. But yeah, obviously not as good because the trolls are much faster, and also when it comes to melee, the trolls are actually somewhat useful. The orc catapult crew are most certainly not. Two units of the Blackguard of Barad-dûr, a unit that we have seen used to very good effect recently as well. Their mass pushing has been very useful in a defensive capacity more so than an offensive one, but I'm sure here we will see them used in their more traditional habitat of trying to push through heavily armoured and sort of shielded defensive lines. He's actually brought lots of them as well. He's brought 4 units of them, which will cut into his army size a little bit. It will mean that his Mordor traditionally a faction that are able to bring some of the biggest armies in the game. That won't be the case going into the red limit this much on Blackguard of Barad-dûr. This is a rather bold move, but it does give them an enormous amount of mass with which to push with. That was a real tongue twister. We've got some morale on infantry as well, so I would imagine, just based on the fact he's going into the red limit quite hard, the main body of his army isn't going to be super high quality, which is perhaps a little bit of a concern for Mordor, but the morale on infantry will still do a job at least supporting the push of the Blackguard of Barad-dûr, but not too much else. The Minas Morgul Chosen, to be fair, are a very decent, heavily armoured spearmen, and they also can support a push by putting themselves into shield wall and using the mass of spearmen, heavy spearmen at that. They're not necessarily the quickest at killing things for a high tier unit, or higher tier unit for the orcs, you know, for what you pay for them. But they do offer some much needed steel to the centre of most Mordor lines, so I'm not too surprised to see them here, because with the kind of tactics I imagine the orc player here is going to try and engage in, that's probably going to be quite necessary. Several units of orc archers here at the back as well, obviously the cheaper variant of the orc archers, so they're not really going to be up to much, especially not skirmishing with the 3 factions that are on the defence today, but it's always important as the attackers to at least contest the long range skirmish game, because if you don't, you're just going to allow the defenders to tee off into your big blobs of infantry, and that would do you no good at all. And then really the only unit of high tier infantry, super heavy infantry, monstrous infantry that Mordor have brought are the Olag High. Now, the Olag High, we've seen them be very effective in the last 2 battles, the last one in particular where they really smashed Dale to bits as Dale was actually gaining the upper hand. But only 1 unit of them in this case. We'll see how well they're used. A very unorthodox Mordor army this, you know, not leaning into the really high quality infantry units at all that they have really, or cavalry. So yeah, definitely a weird way to play Mordor, but considering there are 5 armies on the attack, you can afford to be a little bit weird with some of your army picks, I think, and it not affect you too much. A second Mordor army played by Clitati. He's got some orc fodder here pushing up the ram, getting ready to move into this gate, the northernmost gate on CARN DUM. Some Moran on infantry, looking like a sort of more traditional quote-unquote Mordor army. He's got some Moran on infantry over here. He's got some orc maulers and some Sauron's Will, so a lot of armour piercing there. He's got some Nazgul in and amongst the mix there as well. You can see their slender long swords. He also has his Temple Executioners with the armour upgrade in there, so both of Mordor's really scary melee infantry units are here. Some Troll Drummers to keep their lower tier units in line. Some more Orc Archers, so again more low tier archers, which are really just going to be here for engaging the enemy and trying to waste their ammunition, and any kills they get will be a bonus. Good to see the Temple Guard as well. The armour piercing arrows will be exceptionally useful against all 3 of the defensive factions today if they can get into a good position to shoot. Some Morannon archers back here as well, and some orc javelins, as well as, that looks like some standard mountain trolls, and indeed it is. So not enough money left over for the Olag High, but still some trolls. Still maybe not exactly the Mordor army you're likely to see most of the time, because it is very heavy on its skirmish presence actually. A lot of archers. There's also the javelins in there as well, but a little bit more what you would expect, because he's gone for sort of a more mixed approach, and certainly a more balanced approach with his front line. Now we move on to Nowaki, who's going to be playing as Angmar. He's got some Guardians of CARN DUM here on the front with both the rusted armour and the cleaned up armour. The jet black with the fur capes. Very dependable line infantry unit, very tough, heavy armour, big shields. The Barrow Wight, it's been a little while since we've seen the Barrow Wights in action. Obviously you know what they're all about, a tar pit in melee. Makes it very difficult to get rid of Angmar once they're in melee quickly, which can be a problem for the defenders if you engage them in the wrong way. More Barrow Wights back there. Blackwatch Legion, so yet more mass pushing units to add to the 4 units of Blackguard that Mordor brought. Gundabad Guard, heavy spearmen of course, some Witch Realm Scourge Raiders, very vulnerable to arrow fire, but a pretty decent damage dealer for what they cost. Some more Witch Realm Scourge Raiders over here who do have the armour upgrade, so you can see they've been given helmets. A real luxury for orcs. Also some armour upgraded Witch Realm Pikemen as well, just to try and mitigate some of that range damage they're going to be taking, I'm sure. Very dependable unit of pikes as well, very similar to the Uruk-hai from Isengard. So Witch Realm Blackguard again, a very dependable unit. You can see the witches in there, everyone's favourite. Be interesting to see if they get any decent shots. Some Angmar Marauders and some Trolls of Gundabad. So again, pretty standard fare for what you'd expect, I think, from Angmar. More heavily leaning into their quality, which is what you would expect from them, more so than Mordor, I think. You can see here Isengard playing as Isengard. That's going to get kind of strange pretty quickly. You can see there the Nazkai, who once again are resting their swords on the floor before they move in, but of course very, very devastating unit of shock infantry. Uruk-hai Berserkers doing the same. There's a very interesting glitch there. Very low armour of course on the Uruk-hai Berserkers in comparison to the Nazkai, but still very damaging. And some Uruk-hai Pikemen. These aren't the 3 units you want pushing up your siege towers. They're like the last 3 units you want pushing up your siege towers, to be honest with you. The rest of the Isengard army is much farther down the hill. Uruk-hai Reavers, he's got the Trolls of the White Hand as well, which are every bit the match really of the Olag High, so it does go to show how strong they can be. Uruk-hai Pikemen. Some Snaga Skirmishers down here, cheap javelins for the Orcs are always a good move, I think. Uruk-hai Infantry and Raiders off to the side. We have some Uruk-hai Crossbowmen, some Dunlending Clansmen, 2 units of them, and some Uruk-hai Reavers, and further back we have some more Uruk-hai Crossbowmen. So again, a bit of a... well, there's actually some Raiders and some infantry over there as well. So yeah, kind of standard fare for Isengard, leaning a little bit more into numbers than maybe they would on an open field, but in a siege that's kind of to be expected. And then finally, the Orcs of the Misty Mountains, rounding off all of the Orc factions. We have RXN Rogue playing as them. Heavy Goblin Spears adding a bit of AP to their spears, which is always nice. It makes them a little bit better in melee with infantry to offset that malice a little bit. We have some Goblin Infantry, completely free for the first unit of course. Some Heavy Goblin Halberdiers, a lot of Mountain Uruk Hosts, which I'm in favour of because, again, like I've said before, they offer the same sort of performance as something like the Uruk-hai Infantry or, you know, even the Guardians of CARN DUM, but for a lower cost. You know, they're a very efficient unit to use at the moment. They're by no means overpowered, but for what you pay, there's really no reason to bring the Heavy Goblin Infantry, which are cheaper and an enormous amount worse, over them. Heavy Goblin Spearmen here on the front line as well. Heavy Goblin Halberdiers, some White Uruk Fearmongers. There is a Mangonel here, which I'll be interested to see how the Mangonel gets along in this battle, to be honest with you. It's a very interesting piece of siege equipment. Maybe not the most dependable thing in the world, but it's certainly box office. Goblin King's Bodyguard, some Heavy Goblin Spears back here, and that's just about it. I don't think I can see anything else hidden. Oh no, there is the Cave Troll Drummers, which is good, because you've got to keep all these Heavy Goblins in line somehow, of course. However, now we shall move on to the Defenders, which is going to be a mix of MSQ2, playing as Dale as we've already seen. Isaac Noobton, who's going to be playing as Gondor, that's a good name. And there is also Numenor, played by someone, RH0. So, we have the Blackshot Dragon Slayers from Dale up here. Dale, of course, had a rough time of it in the last siege battle we saw them take part in. But this time, you know, they're on the defence, which is maybe a little bit more comfortable for them with all their archers and sort of their infantry, which is a little bit more focused around survivability. And alongside Gondor and Numenor, we have really a heavily armoured shell here on the outside of this defensive fortress. Gondor archers fully upgraded. I would imagine that there's going to be a lot of quality here on the defence. Guards of Osgiliath, Citadel Guard with the armour piercing, of course, Ravenhelms of CARN DUM with that really high base damage, Axemen of Lasarnak with both levels of armour upgrades as well, nice base damage but also AP, Nimlothian Honour Guard with their AP, so obviously much what you'd expect from Gondor. They've got a lot of really defensive but also pretty nasty infantry. Marksmen of CARN DUM as well. We have some Veterans of Osgiliath with both levels of armour upgrade. Marksmen of CARN DUM once again, so Gondor bringing all their finest stuff and upgrading it as much as they possibly can. Citadel Guard, Guards of Osgiliath, some Gondor archers up on the wall over here with the Keldwyn River Patrol from Dale. Cheap javelins there. More Ravenhelms, more Axemen, yeah, more Gondorians over here as well. Wardens of the White Tower, Fountain Guard, the heart and soul of any good Gondorian army, and some Vanguard of King Elisar. I think that's pretty much everything from Gondor, to be honest with you. I think they've centred most of their army around here. Keldwyn River Patrol up on the walls once again. Some Seafarers of Nindamos from Numenor, I should say. Big fan of them because of the damage they can do for the amount of cost. We can see the Remena Abarim up here on the walls, backing up the Balagar archers who are already firing. Remena Nardukadar, very similar to the Citadel Guard they're going to be fighting alongside today. Pharazim Swordmasters, we've seen how powerful they can be in the past, extremely deadly. Naru Naaru Sentinels, obviously a really strong unit of pikes as well, up there alongside the likes of the 1st Legion. Belagai Pikemen, obviously just a more basic unit of pikes, but still pretty damn decent, to be honest with you, for what they cost. Royal Legion of Armenelos, the nice brass armour that they wear, very striking. Also, the higher unit count they have in comparison to most other units of this type is really important. It gives them a huge advantage over most other types of this type of infantry. Remena Abarim and Belagai archers, more Nardukadar as well as more Seafarers. Then we get into the Dalian units, the main body of the Dalian army. You can see the Bardian Marksman upgraded. I really like the upgraded model on the Bardian Marksman, the Chainmail and Lamella. The Dalian Paladins, we saw them in the last battle. You know, they kind of got dumpstered a little bit by the Temple Executioners, but that wasn't really their fault because that's the kind of fight they don't want. Up against more sort of standard heavily armoured line infantry, they will wreck house. Some Dalian Bowmen up on the walls as well, where you'd expect Dale to have a lot of their strength, is in their archers, of course, which makes them a real asset to have on the defence, especially alongside 2 infantry Deathballs in Gondor and Numenor. Dismounted Earls of Dale, though, can certainly contest an infantry fight as well. We'll see how well they do against Mordor. Swordmasters of Askaroth with their higher base damage is also going to be important. Some Morroquendi pikes to give it a little bit more rigidity to the line, as well as the tankier but shorter range Barding Herd. A lot of Barding Herd actually, which is to be expected in a battle like this, I think. Dalian Royal Guard. Back here we have another unit of the upgraded Bardian Marksmen, and I think there's a couple of units up here, indeed there is, from Numenor. We have some Bawabarim up here with their AP arrows, more Remena Abarim, some Adunaim Shadow Bows, some Seafarers of Nindamos. That's actually a good point. That's the first unit of Rangers I've actually seen for the defenders so far. Some Pelagian Marines from Gondor over there, but interesting choice if they only have brought 1 Ranger. Remena Abarim, we see the Trebuchet, of course, as well, which can be so deadly on a battlefield like this where there are narrow passages for it to take advantage of. And, of course, the Naru Naaru Royal Guard, which is where our Pharazon is going to be rolling today. But I think, without further ado, it's about time we got this show on the road. And immediately, of course, the Numenorian archers, the Balagai archers, starting to fire into the Angmar forces that are on the front here. But Angmar won't mind this, to be honest with you. The Barrow-wights have got so much hit points that, you know, they can tank this sort of arrow fire for quite some time. And even then, they're not the most important unit in the Angmar army, so Nowaki won't be too worried about that. And even the Guardians of CARN DUM, very heavily armoured and shielded from the front, so a unit of basic archers like the Balagai archers are unlikely to do grievous damage to them. And immediately, we're going to be seeing the settlement of CARN DUM placed under attack. So the Guardians of CARN DUM here, trying to reclaim their home. The Citadel of the Witch King. Mordor also going to be moving forward. Obviously, Isengard a little bit more stretched out, so it's going to take them a little bit longer to get in position to try and attack Gondor. But it is going to be interesting to see how the attackers go about this. Are they going to go both Mordor armies attacking Dale, the other 2 Orc armies attacking Gondor, and then Angmar has to try and deal with Numenor alone? If that's the case, Angmar are in real trouble, because this is probably the hardest position to take, because they've also got the support of the Trebuchet back there as well. And also a lot of this infantry is immediately ready to engage as well. The Guardians of CARN DUM have pushed up the siege tower to the walls now, though, which is going to force the Balagai archers into retreat, but I would definitely back the Remena Abarim in a fight against the Guardians of CARN DUM. Armour upgrade or no. I think that, you know, Numenor's infantry is just going to be too strong, especially with the Royal Legion. I did also see the Pharazim Swordmasters move across over here, so that's going to make it an incredibly one-sided engagement. A bold move to commit the elite units immediately, but I like it. it means that Angmar are going to have to commit forward something serious just to get into the settlement, which sometimes attackers make the mistake of not doing. The Orcs of the Misty Mountains slowly trundling their way forwards. Oof, the Trebuchet also immediately firing. Unfortunately for them, though, missing. I think they were probably going for the Witchhound Blackguard and the Pikeman. I mean, it's a good target to go after, to be honest with you. The Trebuchet is far more accurate now, but even there it was just not quite able to hit its mark. Now you can see that the Taller, that's quite a drop for the Guardians of CARN DUM to fall off, but they will do it regardless to try and reclaim their home, but they're going to be plunging into the welcoming arms of Romena Abarim and Pharazim Swordmasters, which from their point of view is probably not ideal. Very interesting animation that, but that's classic medieval too. And over on this side, it's not much better, to be honest with you. I mean, the Royal Legion of Armenlos are not quite as deadly as the Pharazim Swordmasters, but they're still so far in excess of what a Guardian of CARN DUM is going to be able to contest with. I mean, they do have the armour upgrades, so they probably will last a little bit longer over on this side, but it's still not looking particularly good for them, to be honest. Over here, meanwhile, you can see that Mordor sort of getting into position. Clotati, I think he's waiting for Beazle to get his army over here as well to launch a joint assault on the front gate. Here, though, you can see there are actually some Balagyr archers that have got caught up in the middle of this. Maybe the Guardians of CARN DUM can stab a few of them, but I'm being honest, this is not a particularly wise fight for Angmar to have taken. Of all the factions on the defence today, Numenor, in terms of quality, are the scariest. And there you can see that the Guardians of CARN DUM using Force Jump to retreat. They're going to get out of here. Yeah, they're actually not breaking. Nowaki is just sort of realising the situation that he's in now, and he's going to try and get them out of there. The Guardians of CARN DUM over here are also going to try and get out of there. They probably will break, though, in the presence of something like the Pharazim Swordmasters doing damage to them as they turn their backs to them. That's going to be the big oof for them. Meanwhile, Balagyr Pikemen getting into position, getting ready to receive the Barrow-wights with the backup of 2 units of Romena and Nardupidar, so it doesn't get any easier for Angmar. Like, if Angmar want to break through here, they're going to need support, because Numenor is just such a high-quality force, and obviously you'd expect that. They have more money to play with than Angmar do, most certainly, so 1 versus 1, Angmar are never going to stand too much of a chance here against Numenor. Maybe the Witchers can equalise things. I'm sure that would make everyone super happy. Meanwhile, as we get over here, the Goblin Infantry have moved forward, and obviously they very much as a free unit of fodder are going to come forward and batter the gates down over here, laying the groundwork for an assault on the Gondorian defence. A little bit more room over here perhaps for the Gondorians to spread their army out a little bit more. Ooh, and actually a bit of a counter-attack coming out of the gates here. The fully upgraded Gondor Infantry going to charge forward, and of course against the Goblin Infantry, that's going to be an easy win for the Gondorian soldiers. There are some Uruk-hai Reavers coming forward as well, but they're also getting shot from the archers up on the walls, and they are very weak to arrow fire. They only wear very basic leather scraps for armour, no shields. Is it really cunning to put a siege tower on a wall? I mean, that's what you would expect them to do. Yeah, the Goblin Infantry already taking some damage. Goblin Infantry going to scurry back inside the gate and reposition themselves. You can see here the Gondor archers definitely going after the right target in the Uruk-hai Reavers. They're such a vulnerable unit to arrow fire that it makes perfect sense. However, Mordor now, Clotati moving forward, not content to wait for Beazle any longer. They're just going to move in and start the initial engagement. Swordmasters of Esgaroth ready to receive them. I can't imagine the attackers have taken any walls genuinely just yet. No. Certainly Angmar aren't going to be able to do this to Numenor. Well, there goes that gate. Mordor smashing their way through there over on that flank. Let's go and see what's happening over here. You can see the Dalian bowmen trying to get into a good position to shoot. Yeah, you can see that there are Morannon infantry. I mean, you'd certainly back the Swordmasters of Esgaroth in a melee fight against the Morannon infantry, even with the numbers discrepancy. The high damage and the high melee defence of the Swordmasters should be enough to see them through, although the Morannon infantry should be able to make a gap with their sheer numbers. And here we go once again. Morannon infantry going to have to take the same plunge. The Dalian bowmen are over here as well, though. I'm not sure whether that was intentional. They have got their axes out, though, so maybe they have used up their ammunition already. If that's the case, then they will give the numbers that the Swordmasters of Esgaroth need to dominate this fight. Most of Dale's line archers like this are half decent line infantry in melee, which is kind of necessary. I think they also have the armour upgrade as well. It's kind of difficult to tell with the Dalian Bowmen because the two models look very similar. There are differences, but I think they do have the armour upgrade in this case. But yeah, the Moranon infantry are they're already shaken. Like the damage they're taking at the hands of the Swordmasters, the support from the Dalian Bowmen, it was always going to be too much for a unit of very basic Orc line infantry like this. Always going to be a big ask for them to try and make something happen from there. As they take the plunge down there. Meanwhile, the Bardian marksmen getting into position. They're actually taking some full frontal volleys from the Orc archers, which may be not ideal. I mean, they are a terrific skirmish archer, but you never really want to be taking the first volley. But you can see where the Bardian marksmen are able to just sort of hold their ground with their thick lamellar armour and chainmail and their shields. Really, none of them are falling. Every time they fire a volley into the Orc archers, the first line gets completely obliterated. So yeah. Even though they took the first volley here, the discrepancy in quality is going to be far too much for the Orc archers. And Dale flexing their muscles when it comes to their biggest strength there. Swordmaster Escort, I think they lost a single unit model there, and that's all. So it really does go to show you really need to sort of consider how you're going to take the walls carefully, because if you don't, your units are just going to get absolutely slaughtered. Goblin infantry coming forward once again. I'm not sure. I think the Orcs are caught in two minds here. I'm not sure they know how they want to approach this. But I mean, here you can see Nowaki moving in. Very bold to do this with the Barrow-wights, but unfortunately for him, he's going to be pinned in by quality infantry units that the Barrow-wights are going to struggle to actually kill off, taking damage directly from the Narrow Roar Guard, but also more worryingly the Trebuchet, because of course the Trebuchet doesn't care about the high amount of hit points the Barrow-wights have. It's an instant kill. And the Barrow-wights are getting absolutely obliterated, so it's been a really harsh battle so far for Angmar. But to be fair, I feel as though the armies on the other two flanks, they need to be far more aggressive than they're currently being. The Misty Mountains and Isengard especially are just kind of sat there. Like, the Gondorians aren't going to go away. They're not going to get bored and let you come into the settlement. You have to force your way in. And it doesn't look like they're too eager to do that from the start here. I'm sure they will get around to it eventually, but thus far, no such luck. Meanwhile, the Orc archers over here continuing to try and skirmish with the Bardian marksmen. You can see over here as well the towers. Oh, and it's actually fire arrows, so not a bad idea actually. You know, make them a little bit more depleted and then try and break them with the fire ammunition. But unfortunately, to sort of counteract that, the Troll Drummers are forward, which, you know, with a bit of perpetually routing Moranon infantry there, but with the Troll Drummers forward, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to rout these Orcs. They will stay around for a little longer. Orc fodder are here. But yeah, again, I think it's a little bit comfortable for Dale at the moment. I mean, there are a lot of archers, to be fair, so Mordor have to try and play things in this way, I suppose. But unfortunately for them, I suppose it's unfortunate for Clatati that he was set up against Dale, the faction who, more than any of the others on display here, are going to be very comfortable in that kind of fight. Angmar Marauders arrived on the front line and almost immediately broke in the face of the Númenórean steel wall that they were facing off against. Barrow-wights continuing to fight. I mean, the silver lining here for the attackers is it is a 5v3, so they can afford to make the odd mistake or two and it not really affect their chances of victory, but they need to be aggressive. Like in this situation in a 5v3, if you just crash down on the defenders with everything you have all at once, it can be very, very difficult for the defenders to withstand that. Yeah, I'm not really the biggest fan of how Isengard and the Misty Mountains have approached this so far, because their allies are out here, especially Angmar, getting dumpstered, and they're just kind of sat there. I'm not sure what they're waiting for. They're not going to get an invitation into the settlement, as I said. Romen and Ardukadar, the heavily armoured Númenórean spears, continuing to push back against the Barrow-wights. The damage they've already taken is fairly significant. And the Númenóreans thus far, very, very comfortable. I'm a huge fan of the Númenórean unit models for the Romena. I think they look fantastic. And here the armour-piercing spears doing the business against the Barrow-wights. A scary unit, but the Trebuchet has made them substantially less scary. Meanwhile, the Moranon infantry are here, sort of clipping through the door there. Very strange indeed. Some of the Bardian marksmen have fallen now, so some of those arrows have finally managed to find their marks, but still, this is only one unit of the Dalian archers. A nice unified volley there into the Mordor forces as they move forward. crispy orcs outside the settlement now. But still, not a great deal of movement from Mordor either. You can actually see that Beazle now moving forward some orc archers. Beazle needs to move forward with his blackguard, to be honest with you, because Cletazi never had the most infantry in their army anyway. So that the ability to keep up an assault against Dale like this was always going to be fairly limited, especially against a very well-prepared Dalian defence like this. Swordmass of Esgaroth with their damage up on the walls, the more heavily armoured and tankier units down on the ground. And you can see here just the V-shaped formations being formed up by both Dale, Mordor, and are Gondor doing it as well? No, Gondor are actually counter-attacking outside their gates once again. Because once again, you know, it's only the lowest tiers of unit that Misty Mountains and Isengard are sending forward. And these are exactly the kind of units which the Gondor infantry are going to be very comfortable against. Especially fully upgraded like they are. Like, that armour is going to make it very, very difficult for the Dunlending clansmen here to inflict any sort of casualties on them. And of course, manpower is the main advantage you have when playing as the orcs and when you're playing on the attackers when you outnumber the defenders. Like, that's how you win the battle. So, allowing your more numerous units to be killed off for nothing is more of a mistake than it may first appear. And you can see here that the Gondor infantry are now being backed up by Citadel Guard, who have just arrived on the scene as well. Which, again, is not good news for Isengard here. I mean, they're going to try and get some Snaga skirmishers into position, but you can see the Snaga skirmishers have also taken volleys from the archers up on the walls as they've approached. So, again, frankly not ideal. Oh, that was a headshot there on that Dunlending clansman. He was at the back hoping that he could get away with not fighting, but in the end he just got headshotted instead. The Barrow-wights are still fighting, but again, they're really not going to be able to achieve much of anything here. There's 2 units of pikes, there's heavily armoured spears. They're really not going to be able to land so much as a hit. It's going to take them a long time to die off in the face of these pikes, to be fair, but Angmar are really not making any sort of progress with just a single unit of Barrow-wights. They're starting to... Actually, the Orcs of the Misty Mountains have come across with some reinforcements for Angmar, but they need to make something happen fairly quickly here. Meanwhile, what do Mordor intend on doing? Mordor are trying to shoot their arrows over the walls, and to be fair, they are going after the right kind of targets. I mean, Dale don't have many soft targets in their army. A lot of their units tend to be pretty well armoured and pretty well shielded. But the Keldon River Patrol is certainly one of the units you can go after. Their padded gambesons don't really do much against the kind of arrow fire that they are often subjected to. And of course, cheap javelins can be a problem. Potential for a decent amount of damage here. The Swordmasts of Esgaroth are another decent target for archers, but they're behind the battlements on the walls, so I don't think they're going to be able to be shot quite so easily. Troll drummers are still here, but still Mordor not too eager to push in as of yet. Angmar have really been the only ones so far to commit much of anything. Balagar pikemen actually pushing forward, so both units of pikes now getting in front of the spears. And they're doing very well, it must be said. The Phalanx is performing exactly as you would want. The Barrow-wights have got extremely low mass, so they're actually very vulnerable to being held at range by pikemen, because of course the way to defeat pikemen from the front is to try and push through their formation with mass, but this is not something Barrow-wights can do. So the Phalanx on pike units is doubly effective really against Barrow-wights. I mean, it takes them a long time to die. Pikes don't do their damage quickly against regular units, let alone Barrow-wights, but it's a fight the Barrow-wights are always set up to lose without support. So, while up here you can see the Gondor archers continuing to do their thing. Gondor continuing with their foray outside the gates, and why not? The Gondor infantry and the Citadel Guard that are here easily able to clean up the Dunlending clansmen. You can see here that on the approach the Uruk-hai Reavers taking more damage from the Gondorian archers up on the walls, but I mean, at the very least the Uruk-hai Reavers in melee will be able to do a little bit more, especially to the Gondor infantry with those large AP axes that they wield, but they're already shaken because they're so close to the walls, the towers, the archers doing damage, and yeah, the Orcs, they need to be more aggressive with this. They need to just accept the fact that they're going to if they push forward with everything they have, of course they're going to take massive losses, but that's the way to do it. You're playing as the Orcs, their lives don't matter. Citadel Guard, victory almost a certainty. Obviously a very high quality unit, there's only 70 of them, but still. I mean, those axemen are doing the right thing, getting closer to the walls, trying to make it more difficult for the archers at least to hit them. They're still going to be subjected to the tower fire, but that's much more of a slow burn when it comes to damage. But even so, the Citadel Guard are still going to be too dominant in this fight for me. They need to, like, look at all these numbers they have. at their disposal. The Misty Mountains and Isengard, I think, had the most numerous armies because of Mordor's slightly unorthodox approach. Meanwhile, the Orc fodder coming forward, and once again they're making the mistake of just sending forward a unit of basic fodder without any kind of support, and of course against Dalian Paladins you're scarcely going to see a more one-sided fight. Those Great Maces are going to be cracking some Orc skulls. This is light work for the Dalian Paladins, really. Easy peasy. Bardian Marksman also going to be able to get up onto the walls. And there you can see, I'm not sure whether that's as a result of the towers. I think it probably is, but yeah, those towers obviously firing their flaming ammunition, and that siege tower is going to crumble. Not that that's too much of a problem, obviously, they were just using it for cover anyway, but still going to be a problem because now the towers are going to be free to shoot into those units that have massed up. The Barrow Wights almost completely gone at this point. The Balagai Pikemen retreating back. Oof. That's maybe a bit of a frivolous use of the Seafarers of Nindamos. There's no real need to use them on the Barrow Wights now. They're already gone. But those Seafarers are in a perfect position to rain hell down on the next genuine assault that comes through here. There goes the siege tower, reverting back to the old Medieval 2 model when it crumbles. But look at this. And there you can see the Snaga skirmishers once again in full view of the Gondor archers, who have had their pick of targets which they're very good at. I mean, the Gondor archers are not exactly the highest damage archer in the game, but against the likes of Uruk-hai Reavers and Snaga skirmishers, again, it's light work. And now the Gondorians are going to retreat back inside, having almost completely destroyed the Dunlending clansmen and those Uruk-hai Reavers once again. So Isengard, slowly but surely, having their manpower chipped away at. And things are only getting worse as back here the crossfire of the two units of Gondorian archers is ripping into these poor Snaga as they form up. I mean, I'm not really sure what Isengard is thinking here. Let's see, look at the army they've got at their disposal. They could so easily push in and put more pressure on. As it is, though, I mean, maybe they're trying to absorb our ammunition, but there's plenty more where that came from Gondor, from their better units as well, so personally I'm not so sure. Witch Realm Scourge Raiders trying to get into position, trying to throw their projectiles, I assume, through the gap. The Barrow Wights are still fighting, to be fair. It goes to show that even when they're on their last legs, they still try their best. Those towers still firing away, doing damage to the infantry units that are hidden behind those siege towers. The Scourge Raiders getting in position now. Are we going to see them throw a volley? It doesn't look like it. Well, regardless, let's head over. Finally we have a big committal of units here from Mordor. The Olag-hai from Beazle have moved forward, the Mountain Trolls from Clatati, and they're also now attacking the walls as well, once again with Morannon infantry. We saw how well this went last time, but just the fact they're attacking on multiple fronts is a reason to be cheerful from an attacking point of view now. The Dalian Bowmen firing away into the infantry as it moves forward. These Trolls need support, I think, because if they don't get it, units like the Barding Herd are going to be able to inflict a decent amount of damage on them. There's no shock infantry in here, I don't think. At least I didn't see. I think the Paladins retreated somewhere, because the Paladins would be ideal against these Trolls, to be honest with you. But now Mordor finally pushing forward. So the biggest assault we've seen from the attackers so far, and it's on the Dalian front here. But the Dalian front line so far is holding fast. They need the Blackguard of Barad-dûr to come forward. They would be perfect in this situation. But they're all still back over there, I think. Just one unit of Blackguard of Barad-dûr could push through, make a hole, and then they could flood in. But again, I think maybe an ill-judged composition has been sent forward here. I was assuming the Blackguard of Barad-dûr would be coming forward because it's the ideal time to use them, but I think they're falling into the trap of trying to save their favourite units for the end once again, and that is a surefire way to get yourself to lose the battle, as I keep saying over and over again, but my words often fall on deaf ears, it seems. Barding Herd going to be forming up. The Trolls are almost completely gone at this point because they didn't have the proper support. Infantry units are starting to flood in now. The Sauron's Will should actually be very good against the dismounted Earls of Dale, who have taken a lot of losses at the hands of the Trolls already, but bravely they continue to hold the line. And again, this should be the sort of thing that Mordor are doing in tandem with the other factions on the other gates. This should be happening on every gate all at once, and that would be incredibly difficult for the defenders to defend against. But as it is, Dale only have to worry about this gate. The other defenders can just sort of wait. The Daily Royal Guard firing into this Mordor blob. Still nothing over here. Up on the wall here. Temple Executioners now moving down. Now this changes the battle significantly because the Morannon Infantry were going to be no match for the Swordmasters of Esgaroth. The Temple Executioners, however, will tear through the Swordmasters of Esgaroth with relative ease. But the Temple Executioners are very, very vulnerable now to missile fire from both the Bardian Marksmen down there and the Keldrin River Patrol, of course, those javelins. I mean, the Morannon Infantry is now broken as well, so the Temple Executioners are going to be all alone. I think seeing that, they are going to get down from the wall and go down through this door over here and engage alongside the infantry down here. Try and help do some damage to the dismounted Earls of Dale. The Dalian Paladins are back. We saw how poorly the Dalian Paladins did against the upgraded Temple Executioners previously. But in this situation where the Temple Executioners have got not sufficient support, I think so they might be just fine. Meanwhile, heavy Goblin Crossbowmen trying to shoot through the gap with some success. Obviously this is a very useful tool the Misty Mountains have at their disposal. The stopping power of crossbows can be so useful for the Orc factions that have them, Isengard and the Misty Mountains. They are firing into the Belagire Archers. Maybe not the most important target to go after though for the crossbows, and of course the Belagire Archers can at the very least get some return fire in there as well. Arrows raining down from on high, so the Goblins are doing damage but not necessarily to the correct units in my mind. Once again, a really limp-wristed assault coming forward from this angle as well. It does look as though at least Isengard are actually going to set foot inside the settlement now, though, as they get some Uruk-hai raiders up the siege tower, and they are going to try and engage the defences up on this wall. And you know, Gondorian archers just sort of holding their ground. The Gondorian archers up here have made Isengard's life a bit miserable so far, but they are going to retreat now, I think. Try and get off the walls, and I would imagine some sort of infantry unit, yeah, Raven Helms are going to come forward, which will, of course, butcher Uruk-hai raiders relatively easily. Meanwhile, what have we got going on over here? Mordor's assault continues, but still the V-shaped formation of Dale continues to hold its ground. Keldrin River Patrol out of ammunition, being committed to melee. They're very bad in melee, to be honest with you, but at this point, all hands to the grindstone. Try and keep this line as strong as possible. Pull out those blades. The arrow fire coming in here. Temple Executioners, of course, going to be doing work. The Orc Javelins now returning fire. The Dalian Royal Guard are now out of ammunition as well, and they may be set up against the Temple Executioners. They would, of course, lose that fight 1-1, but reinforcing the line that's already over there, and it may go Dale's way, to be honest with you, as the Bardian Marksmen continue to fire away. Yeah, it's really tough here for Mordor. Like, they needed those Blackguard to come forward with this assault, because now, when they do commit the Blackguard forward, how much infantry are they really going to have to take advantage of the gaps they make? Confusing indeed. Keldrin River Patrol marching into position. Swordmasters of Esgaroth are here, as well as the Troll Drummers. Like, the Troll Drummers are going to be providing their morale buffs, which is probably why, to be honest with you, the vast majority of this Mordor infantry hasn't already broken. I can't believe there's still a troll alive in all of this. He's just right in amongst things over here. He's right on the edge of the Barding herd as well. Indeed. There it goes. Another siege tower gone. Fire arrows being thrown in against Mordor over here. Let's go and see what happens to those Uruk-hai raiders. Now, they retreated. They can't have been in melee very long because they immediately left, and the Gondor archers are back now. And now, it looks as though we are finally going to get an engagement. Actually, Gondor have not set up their defence well here at all. I think maybe they got a little bit complacent with how slow Isengard and the Misty Mountains were being, but now the Mountain Uruk host are charging in. They will be able to rescue this situation relatively easily, but that is a little warning that they can't afford to just get too lax with their defending. Gondor infantry and Citadel Guard once again fighting up against the Mountain Uruk host. I mean, this is a more genuine assault which is happening now, but is it too little too late from an attacking perspective? We'll have to wait and see. I personally think it is. Like, I really don't think the attackers have made any sort of gains while having some fairly substantial losses thrown against them. But based on the amount of time that's left in this battle, I would expect them to throw the kitchen sink at the defenders pretty quickly here. And you can see here that Angmar are continuing to try and make something happen. I'll give Nowaki credit for that. I mean, it's kind of reckless to go in through this gap all on your lonesome, but at least he's moving in. The Trolls are already dead. The Numenorians are just ripping through the Angmar forces which come through here. What's going on over there? Heavy Goblin Spears moving off. Angmar Marauders moving forward once again. The burning torches on top of these turrets in CARN DUM. Meanwhile, Keldrin River Patrol taking the vanguard as yet more Mordor forces push in. I mean, the Keldrin River Patrol are not going to last too long here, to be honest with you. A rush of blood to the head and they suddenly feel as though they're expert warriors when they are anything but. Still more arrows coming in, of course. That's always the thing you can count on with Dale. They're always going to have a plentiful supply of arrows to loose into their enemy, and so it has turned out to be here. The Bardian marksmen must have racked up a pretty decent kill count. They themselves are a little bit depleted at this point, but no matter. Temple Executioners are still over here, but with only 20 of them, going up against the phalanx of the Varding Herd and the Dalian Royal Guard, who are certainly no slouches either. This is probably going to be the end of Mordor's finest here, before that second wave can come in and support them. And still, that Dalian V holds firm. It's more depleted than it was, of course. And again, this might be the ideal time to send forward all those units of Blackguard to try and instill some sort of panic in the defenders, because as of yet, they haven't really had cause to panic. Belagair Archers and Naran Ari Royal Guard and the Dunaim Shadow Bows just tearing through the Angmar formations over here. There's some Scourge Raiders getting up onto the walls, but I'm not sure to what end, because the Royal Legion of Armenelos are not going to budge. Meanwhile, as we move over here, well, some heavy Goblin Halberds coming in once again, but again, like, this battle so far has just been a case of the attackers being ill-prepared to deal with the quality. Like, you cannot just send in your low-tier units all on their own against quality units and expect them to do anything. They will get dumpstered and not get, they'll get like 1 to 5 kills at best. It's exactly the wrong thing to do, and I think all of the attackers really have been guilty of it, other than Nowaki. And Nowaki, he had a different problem altogether. He had the most difficult gate to try and take against probably the most difficult opponent in terms of faction here. And, maybe being overly reckless was the Angmar player's problem. But on both sides, both Mordor players, the Isengard and the Misty Mountains player, have all made the same mistake. And I feel as though they've dug themselves a hole here from which they will not be able to escape. But we shall see. It's possible they can just sort of smash this defence to splinters quickly, I suppose. There's always the Witchers, Witch-Realm Scourge Raiders, coming down off the Siege Tower, once again getting into the Royal Legion of Armenelos and the Remnant of Barim, but once again, decent damage on the Witch-Realm Scourge Raiders, but not to the level where you'd expect them to be able to defeat Royal Legion of Armenelos. They are getting kills at the very least, which is more than some units could say. Oh, actually, the Witch-Realm Blackguard are coming down. With the Witch-Realm Blackguard, that may be a slightly more even fight, but with the support, I would still very much expect a Numenor win. Meanwhile, Morroquendi Bows, Athala Rangers are up here as well, units that I missed. The Blackguard of Barad-dûr, they're not pushing, which again I think is a sign perhaps of Beasel's inexperience with the game. Blackguard of Barad-dûr, you really need to be pushing through these lines. The Bardian Marksmen depleted, out of ammunition, they're being committed to melee to try and hold this Mordor push back for an even longer period of time. And certainly so far so good, I would say. It's gone very well for the defenders. The Dalian Paladins are a little bit depleted as well, but they're going to be recommitted and their AP will be very useful against these Mordor units as well. More arrows being loosed. Bardian Marksmen. Really do like the Bardian Marksmen. It's just something about their unit model when it's upgraded that I just really approve of. Meanwhile, over here, this is a bit of a problem. Like, the Witch-Realm Blackguard are going to be subject to all the arrow fire, which will of course mean that this fight should certainly and fairly comfortably go in favour of Mordor. What do we have here? Orc Fellas? I think that's the armour upgraded Orc Fellas as well. Is it not? Maybe. I think the hoods denote an armour upgrade. But they're coming down here, but of course a unit of 47 Orc Fellas is not really going to be what's required to turn the tide of this particular battle. The Misty Mountains are trying to make something happen over here as well. The Mountaineer at coast, but once again it's just wave after wave is sent in, but the waves are too weak and the defenders just easily able to hold them at arm's length. Gondor are actually pushing back over here. The Uruk-hai pikemen being subjected to the finest that Gondor has to offer. Guards of Osgiliath with the Nimlothian Honor Guard. No rest for the weary, most certainly. We're starting to see some more quality units coming forwards now, but it's too late, I think. I think that the losses the attackers have already sustained are going to be just a little bit too severe for them to come back from this one. Wild heavy goblin halberds, meanwhile, taking shots from the marksmen of Caer Andros up on the walls, of course. Ooh, hello. The witches are coming forward. Could this be the moment the attackers have been waiting for? Because this battle could turn around if the attackers can just flood into the settlement with their numbers. That's always the moment where the attackers can get a lot of good kills on the defenders, but they need to make some way in. And it doesn't look like the Blackguard over on the other side were going to be able to do that. But the Witchers may be able to allow Isengard and the Misty Mountains to come in over here. Nowaki sensing that he wasn't going to be able to use them in the middle. Yeah, Numenor's defence has barely budged, to be honest with you. Moran infantry starting to rout now. More and more orcs are being committed forward, but at this point it's like orc archers and orc javelins. Swordmass of Esgaroth coming down from the walls. Blackguard of Barad-dûr starting to rout off. Dale's defence standing firm in the face of this Mordor aggression. And again, mass routing now starting to happen for Mordor. Yeah, very poorly executed assault, I have to say. Newer players will know it was poor over there. Which round Blackguard? Again, now all on their lonesome, surrounded by Royal Legion and Romena Abarim. So the support the Royal Legion are getting will certainly give that fight to them. Well, I can see that there is like a sort of smouldering patch that the Witchers must have shot, but he must have hit the siege tower, which is not ideal. And the Witchers almost certainly should be being shot here by the Gondorian player. What is going on now? Some raiders climbing back down. Uruk-hai pikemen trying to get out of the way, so clearly there is some level of, again, a poor shot. There's some level of cooperation. Oh dear. Friendly fire from the Witchers now, of all things. Some level of cooperation going on between the factions here as they communicate with one another. But, yeah. Shall we say it's not been terrific from their perspective. As the trolls continue to bang away on those drums. That again, that's just very, very poor. There we go. Finally a decent shot. I mean, they got just as much friendly fire. In fact, perhaps more friendly fire in terms of amount of kills, but the quality of the units they were shooting into probably makes that worth it. But, man. There we go. The attackers needed some sort of break. And that may be it. We'll come back and see what happens there later on, I think. But here we can see that Numenor, I think they sense the weakness of the attackers at this point. I mean, to be fair, there are Blackback Berserkers over here. Not the easiest target for the Pharazim Swordmasters to charge into all on their lonesome. Across come the Blackguard. I approve of this, honestly. Seeing how dominant you've been up until this point, I approve of coming forward and taking the fight to the attackers. It's almost like the ultimate disrespect as well. It's like you were nowhere near good enough to break into our fortress, and now we're going to come out and just wipe you from the field manually. We don't want any more of your blood inside our settlement. Although I'd hesitate to call CARN DUM a settlement, it's just a straight up fort. Blackguard of Barad-dûr defeat seems certain against the Númenóreans here. Are Dale going to engage in the same sort of tactics, I wonder? Well, the Bulldogs are over here. I mean, kind of. They have left the gates to an extent, and here come the Swordmass of Esgaroth as well. Not quite to the same level as Numenor have, although to be fair, Mordor at the very least were able to inflict a little bit more damage on Dale than Numenor took. The Temple Guard are out here as well, so this will give the Temple Guard an opportunity to try and use those AP arrows to their advantage. Swordmass of Esgaroth doing their thing. I mean, this is risky potentially for the defenders. If they come out and this backfires, it could be exactly what the attackers need to get back into the game. The Bulldogs are not to be taken lightly either. Very strong unit. The Trolls are here. I approve of this move from Numenor, though. The Chad Numenor. Orc Archers being committed to melee. Orc Archers maybe not what you want against Romena and the Pharazim Swordmasters. Goblin Infantry also are going to get chewed to bits. The Blackguard also are just having to be used as infantry here. They're not going to be able to use their pushing capabilities for any sort of gains. Right, let's see. Have the Witchers been able to turn this fight in favour of the attackers? They have. They have indeed. However, they still haven't really been able to bust through the gates because there's yet more Gondorian reinforcements coming in. They're going to be blocking the way. This time it's going to be Fountain Guard and Raven Helms. For a brief moment there, it looked as though the attackers were finally going to be able to flood in. But unfortunately, because of the piss-poor damage that the attackers have done to the Gondorian army up to now, they still have plenty of reinforcements to send forwards. Pharazim Swordmasters are here. The Orc Archers are wavering. Surrounding this force now, Numenor has been so dominant in this fight, I have to say. Partially because Nowaki was all on his own here initially, but also because of the poor tactics that the attackers have employed. Like, I've got to say, like, the attackers have not been particularly impressive in this game. Hasn't been really anything that I've approved of with regards to what they've done. Nothing has really worked out for them. Just a single unit of Blackguard of Barad-dûr now fighting here in the middle, and they're surrounded on all sides by high quality Numenorian infantry. So this fight is only going to end one way, of course. Very grim for them. Meanwhile, Dale and Rogar. So Dale also pushing out. There goes one of the generals. The Gondorian line. I will say though, this is a pretty intimidating trio to try and take on. Dale, Gondor and Numenor all have strengths in the same sort of areas with regards to their armour. They've all got archers that are very good as well. But all in slightly different ways. They all cover for one another's weaknesses a little bit more. Numenor, their quality of infantry is enormous, which makes up for perhaps Dale's lack in that area. Certainly in terms of damaging infantry. Gondor, meanwhile, have got the spears, a lot of AP, which is always very nice to have at your disposal. AP in the form of spears mostly, but AP nonetheless. Temple Guard continuing to shoot into the Dalians. I mean, there's a lot of units back here which are yet to be committed, which makes me worry that the attackers here are going to admit defeat, which would kind of be their failure would truly be complete if that was the case. Isengard just not able to get in there. The Mordor general skewered by the Morroquendi. Gondorians continuing to fight here on the front line resolutely. Romen and Nar-Dûkadar also forming up. Axemen of Lasarnak in the background. Vanguard of King Elisar not even committed yet. Veterans Osgiliath there. Raven Helms just stationed up here in case they do try to use the walls once again. Marksmen of Caer Andros now coming down off the walls, out of ammunition, so they're just going to join the front line, of course, with their two-handed swords. And I think Gondor now seeing the opportunity. It's not so much smelling blood in the water, it's more of a feeding frenzy at this point for the defenders. Blackguard Barad-dûr, they've lasted in melee longer than I'd expect them to, honestly, against this level of pressure from Numenor, especially against a unit like the Pharazim Swordmasters, but their fate was sealed long ago in this battle, I would have to say. Trolls the White Hand coming over here to try and help out, but again, very much a token effort, as has been the case with most of what the attackers have had to do in this battle, to be honest with you. Romena Bawabarim, to be fair, they will lose pretty hard to the Trolls of White Hand. Well, Mordor, at this point, are gone. They have well and truly been scoured from the field. And Dale are now going to be able to come out and sort of help out Numenor, so now CARN DUM can be emptied of defenders and they can just chase down this invading force. Uruk-hai infantry now moving forwards. Charging in, the Ramena Abarim are here. But yeah, I mean, at this point it's far too little too late. I mean, to be fair, at least it does look as though Isengard are not going to admit defeat. There's the Mangonel, which we haven't really seen at this point in the battle. They're throwing rotting meat, but at this point, with how confident the defenders are feeling, you're very, very unlikely.
The battle is very much in our favor. If we remain true and steadfast, victory will be ours.
To rout Numenor. Numenor, at the best of times, have got pretty decent morale. Uruk-hai crossbows doing their thing, but they're going to have to hurry up if they want to get any level of kills, because the Dalian forces that are flanking are on the way. There goes another general, this time the Angmar one. Finally killed off. Fighting for a long time up on those walls, to be honest with you. Dismounted Earls of Dale moving forward. The Dalian bowmen defeat is a distinct possibility. And now forward come the Dalian forces as well. There's a lot of crossbow bolts coming in, so that will at least pad out Isengard's kill count a little bit, but yeah. It's been a rather poor showing thus far. Isengard here. Still trying their best, but their best has certainly not been good enough in this fight. The Gondorian line still holding very firm. And now we're starting to see players admit defeat. As I kind of expected, to be honest with you. Based on the amount of time that was left, I didn't think the attackers would... well, to be fair, I mean, Isengard may mass rout. Dale coming across, the Royal Legion of Armenelos, taking some damage, certainly, at the hands of the Witch-Realm Blackguard up on the walls, but nothing too grievous. Poison arrows being loosed from the walls from the Morroquendi bows. The Dalian Royal Guard charging across to stop the Uruk-hai crossbowmen from firing. Defeat seems certain for the Temple Guard. As to be expected when there's only two of them and the entirety of the rest of the Dalian army is here. I mean, Dale are depleted, to be fair. Of all the defending armies, I think Dale have taken the most losses, but even still, the fact that Dale have had the confidence to charge out of the walls. Dalian Royal Guard are going to be able to come down here. There's still some Isengard forces fighting on the front line. The Orc Mangonel crew and the Uruk-hai infantry fighting side by side, but they'll die just like all the rest at the hands of these mighty Ramena. Admitting defeat. Well, they're going to rout pretty soon. There's still the Uruk-hai crossbowmen over here, but I can't imagine they're going to stay in melee for much longer anyway. Let's get a last look at what's happening over on the Gondorian front, if it'll let me go over there. Come on, there we go. Well, I mean, they're all shaken, so they're probably going to rout pretty soon. Again, interested to see if it ends with an admit defeat. Or not. Oof. That's absolutely savage from the Uruk-hai crossbowman there. It's not going to be enough to change the outcome of this battle in any way, but like I said, it will give Isengard a slightly more respectable kill count come the end of the battle, as the Dalian Royal Guard and the Royal Legion of Armenelos finish off the Uruk-hai infantry over there. There's also a battle going on back here between another unit of Uruk-hai crossbowmen and the Dalian bowmen. Dalian bowmen, I think, are actually slightly better in melee anyway, but the numbers discrepancy would mean that wouldn't really have mattered anyway. So dominant. It's rare you see a siege battle where a lot of the action takes place outside the walls, but there we go. A very dominant performance from the defenders, to be honest with you. Not as close as I was hoping. Nowhere near as close as I was hoping, to be honest with you. MSQ2 usually sends me battles that are really close indeed. This one was maybe a little bit more of a vanity project. Just sort of such a dominant performance. Often it smacks of showing off a little bit, to be honest with you. But nonetheless, it was still it is still worth showing purely for the reason that this should be exactly the sort of battle that demonstrates why you shouldn't do what the attackers did here. You should not just send in your fodder on its own to try and attack these choke points, because it doesn't achieve anything. It just wastes soldiers, and the attackers never had the initiative in this battle as a result of that. Like, it's pretty much the ultimate disrespect when you can't even break through the first layer and you end up getting actually chased out of the settlement by the defenders. There was a lot of quality on display for the defenders here, but it's poor form here from the attackers, I have to say. I think I have slightly more sympathy for Nowaki in this situation, because he had by far the most difficult task facing Numenor alone with sort of an army that has less resources. But, you know, ultimately, you know, he still had a choice of whether to move in or not, and ultimately, in that situation, I would say, no, don't move in there. Let the other two armies attack with all their might on the other two choke points first. Wait for Numenor to maybe send over a little bit of support and then come crashing down through the middle. That would have been the play, I think. But ultimately, Nowaki would never have had the chance to do that because his allies just didn't do that. Like, they decided to try and filter in units slowly into the defenders, and ultimately it ended up being a very one-sided affair in the end. I mean, in terms of percentage kills, it was probably actually closer than the battle let on. It was probably around the 20% mark, I would say, because the defending armies are all depleted at least. But yeah, there was never a danger of the defenders ever losing this battle. Let's see what did the damage for Dale. Blackshot Dragonslayer is only getting 10 kills. Morroquendi Pikes getting over 100, which is a display of how strong they were here. Dalian Paladins, Keldon River Patrol, Bardian Marksman getting 246. The Athala Rangers getting 524, of course. Doing a lot of good damage there into the blobs as they appear. Very, very nice indeed. Further down, few units getting over 100 kills as well, but for the most part it was kind of what you'd expected. The missile units for Dale doing most of the damage here for MSQ2. But yeah, like I said, this battle is pretty much the ultimate example really of why you need to consider how you're going to attack more carefully. You need to be able to move in with force rather than just sort of sending in individual units of low quality, because they're not going to do anything. They're not going to achieve anything. It's a bad idea. It's one of the worst things you can do as an attacker, to be honest with you. And it's the sort of thing which new players are likely to do quite a lot of, I think. Try and save their favourite units for the end, more so than trying to commit them early and forcing the defenders into making some decisions. And in this case, obviously, I feel as though most of these... I have seen a lot of these names before. I haven't seen Isengard. I've seen the faction, but not the player. I don't think I've seen RXN Rogue. I don't think I've seen Beazle. I've seen Platati before, but I think it was a long time ago, so maybe this was the first battle that they've played in a long time. But even so, like, very interesting fight this, I would have to say. But still, it's neat to see CARN DUM again. And it's neat to see as well the defenders in a 5v3 be this dominant. I don't think I've seen the defenders in a 5v3 that I've shown be this dominant before. So it does go to show that if you play poorly as the attackers, like I always go on about how if you make a mistake as the defenders, it's pretty much game over. But if you make serious mistakes as the attackers, you can just as easily throw the battle away completely. And I feel as though that is what happened here. So yeah, big thanks to MSQ2 for sending me the battle replay nonetheless. A heroic victory it was, but yeah, it's always good to see a large-scale siege at the very least. Big thanks to all the players as well. Like, I may sound like I'm sort of dumping on the attackers in particular a little bit, but you know, it's only what I see. I can't be complimentary about a battle that they played, which they played pretty awfully in, to be honest with you. But yeah, big thanks to all the players involved. Big thanks to MSQ2 once again for sending me a battle replay on CARN DUM. Been a little while since we've seen that after all. As for the next battle I'm going to do, I'm not entirely sure. Like I said, I have like a list which I work through. It might be a fight on Lake Evendim. I'm not sure. I've been kind of wanting to reorganise how I do things. But we'll see. Again, it's kind of an awkward situation. Like, I'm just kind of moving with momentum at the moment with regards to my recording and stuff. And I don't really have the time or the energy, to be honest with you, to try and change how I do things, even though I would really quite like to. So yeah, regardless, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you'll join me for whatever is next.